I've never been in it for the money. In other words, Playboy isn't a business for me. It has been from the very beginning a labor of love. And that's pretty easy to say because, because if you don't love all of this, and you're a fool.
Hugh Marston Hefner was an American magazine publisher who became an iconic figure in post-World War II America as the creator of Playboy magazine.
My name is Hugh Hefner. I'm 35 years of age and I'm editor-publisher of Playboy magazine. In 8 years, I've built an empire worth $20 million.
Widely known as Hef, he pushed the boundaries of moral tolerance. Through his magazine empire and well-publicized lifestyle, Hefner became not only wildly successful, but to some American males, the most envied man in America. Having recently celebrated his 82nd birthday, Hefner sat down with the New York Times in April 2008 at his California mansion for this interview to discuss his life.
I think that I escaped early on into the dreams and fantasies fueled by the movies and the music of that time, which was, very romantic.
I'm young, healthy, and so are you. When the moon is in the sky, tell me what am I to do?
I'm the kid who never lost touch with those fantasies and made them come true. And a lot of the girls that I've fallen in love with look like the girls I saw in those movies. There were a lot of platinum blondes in the movies in the 1930s, and since my marriage, all my girlfriends have looked like they stepped right out of a Busby Berkeley musical.
Some would say most of the playmates in the magazine have
Yes, I think I could be accused of that, yes. We try to get some ethnic diversity, but we do seem to lean in the direction of blondes.
Hugh Hefner attended Steinmetz High School in Chicago. He was one of the most popular kids in his class, and early on exhibited an unusual creative energy, drawing comic books and writing school plays that he performed with his friends. But his parents were devout Methodists, and at home they created a rigid moral environment that Hefner found stifling. An early rejection from a girl at school would begin the metamorphosis that would change his life.
I was not only crushed, I reinvented myself for the first time. And started referring to myself for the first time as Hef instead of Hugh, changed my wardrobe into what I thought was a little cooler. And it was obviously a way of getting attention, but it was quite literally doing what in effect I would do later on in my life.
Hefner enlisted in the Army in 1944. When he got out, he enrolled at the University of Illinois with plans to marry his college sweetheart after they graduated.
Now, in between the engagement in December and the marriage in June, my fiancée told me that she'd been having an affair, and it devastated me because I was an innocent. I lost my virginity with her, the gal that I expected to marry, and I was still essentially that old-fashioned kind of guy. I didn't get the message that maybe there was some question in terms of the relationship. I wanted to hold on to the relationship. We got married. The magic was gone from the very beginning.
Because of the confession about the...
Yeah, I think so.
The trust was...
Yes. In other words, I think that, I don't think there's any question about it. How it would have turned out without the affair, was I well suited for marriage, etc., I don't know. But I was, truly crushed.
Hefner worked a series of magazine jobs in Chicago, first in the promotion department for Esquire magazine, then as a circulation manager for a children's magazine. It was 1953, and his wife had just had their first child, Christy. To some, it was the perfect American life, but not for the Hef.
And I remember a specific day where I stood on the Michigan Avenue Bridge looking out at Lake Michigan and with tears in my eyes and wondering, is this all there is? Within a week of standing on that bridge, I had decided, against all logic, that I was going to start my own men's magazine, which was a wonderful notion, but I, of course, had no money at all. None. I went to my family and told my father what I was doing and asked him whether or not he would invest or loan me some money. And he, being a conservative accountant, felt it was not a good business deal and declined. And as I was leaving, my mother took me aside and said that she had some money of her own because she had worked during the war. And she gave me a check for $1,000. We managed to put together the total of $8,000, and that is what the magazine and the Empire was launched on. And I came alive that summer. I was tremendously confident. I learned that a calendar company out on the west side of Chicago, very close to where I grew up, owned the rights to the already famous Marilyn Monroe nude that everybody had heard about, but very few people had seen. And the reason very few people had seen it is because the post office wouldn't let them send it through the mail. I'm the kid who didn't think they had that right. We sold over 50,000 copies. The second issue, without Monroe, sold more than the first. In other words, the reason that the magazine was so popular was something more than what we were actually able to create. It was the idea behind it. The magazine grew from that first 52,000 to over 1 million copies a month by the 5th anniversary.
With the success of those first issues of Playboy magazine, Hefner had tapped into an undercurrent of cultural change taking place in America in the late 1950s. Soon Hefner would become the personification of that change.
Before Playboy, men's magazines were mostly outdoor adventure books, so it was guys hanging out with guys and the women were staying at home. Well, that was not what I had in mind. So we're talking about a romantic connection between the sexes from the male point of view. With some cool jazz, the right wheels, the right clothes, the hi-fi, and the apartment.
Hello there. Glad you could join us this evening. I'm Hugh Hefner, editor-publisher of Playboy magazine, and your host. And this is Playboy's Penthouse. Come on in and meet some of our guests.
The notion of the show was a party in my apartment.
Cy Coleman, fellow that wrote Witchcraft.
The score by Cy Coleman. You had Lenny Bruce on the first show.
You've been paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, it was sophisticated for 1959.
Yeah.
How was it received?
Well, it was received extremely well, but not in the South. It's difficult for people to realize what it was like back then, but black and white performers did not socialize in that kind of a setting. This was clearly, conceptually, my apartment. And black and white were hanging out together, drinking together, talking together.
Into it yet, but I hope to get in.
Yeah, do you want a drink?
Yes, I wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Part of the reason for doing the show, making those kind of statements.
Hugh Hefner never tires of preaching the Playboy life, or, he says, of living it. Here in his 40-room house in Chicago, he regularly throws parties lifted right from the pages of his magazine.
Although he had become immensely successful, family life never meshed well with the life of a playboy. In 1959, he divorced his wife, with whom he'd had 2 children, Christy and David. At around the same time, he bought a Chicago mansion and expanded the Playboy brand, opening the first Playboy Club in Chicago. The club franchise spread to cities throughout the United States and around the world and made the Playboy lifestyle widely available.
Good evening, I'm Mike Wallace. The show is Night Beat. Tonight we go after Hugh Hefner, editor and publisher of Playboy magazine. Hugh, we checked this month's issue and found 20 pictures of girls in various stages of undress. Isn't that really what you're selling, kind of a high-class, dirty book?
No, I don't think so at all. There's an important distinction here.
But there would be backlash from both sides of the political divide. Conservatives condemned Hefner and his media empire as morally depraved. And in 1963, a 29-year-old freelance journalist named Gloria Steinem published a series of scathing articles in the arts magazine Show about her experiences as a Playboy bunny. The articles drew the attention of a budding feminist movement and elevated Steinem to its topmost ranks.
It caused a sensation. And she is still remembered with all the things she's accomplished. She's remembered as much as anything as the girl who went undercover at the Playboy Club.
But Hefner was undeterred and continued to expand the Playboy brand with international editions, a television channel, books, and more. The magazine also gained widespread acclaim for its powerful fiction by top writers of the day, and in-depth, revealing interviews with celebrities and public officials like Jimmy Carter, Fidel Castro, and John Lennon. All the while, the magazine and its founder emphasized and practiced a liberal credo known as the Playboy philosophy. Much of what you fought for has come to be.
Yeah.
How has the Playboy philosophy evolved, and where do you think we are today?
The major things have been accomplished. I mean, there is no general censorship as it existed in the past. Certainly in the sexual arena, we certainly have a freedom that we didn't have when I was growing up. In other words, in books and magazines, you can publish almost anything. There was a backlash to the freedoms that were accomplished in the 60s and 70s, so that from 1980 on, with Reagan, the Christian right, the Mies Commission, we did get a kind of conservative backlash. Our founding father tried to give us a constitution to separate the church and state, and it worked part of the time, but not all the time.
Part of the Playboy image is the fantasy which you appear to be living in. That entails sex and lots of it. What is it like to live that fantasy? You've lived it for 82 years.
From my perspective, and it's always subjective, from my perspective, and there may be a few others who would agree, I'm the luckiest cat in the world, and I know it. My dreams have come true beyond anything I could possibly have imagined. In addition to everything else, my life has been rather like a movie. I had a stroke in 1985. If I had died in 1985, then my life would have been more typical. I would have had this great success in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and then this backlash in the 80s, and I would have had a stroke and it was over. Well, I survived, and I got married in part as a refuge from what was going on in the 1980s, and when that didn't work and I came out of it, I discovered, and I've said it before, a whole generation waiting for me to come out and play.
Early arrival? Oh, not that early. Hello there. How are you, darling?
To find the brand and myself as a human being embraced by a whole new younger generation was incredible. And I did fall into what is certainly what could be perceived as excesses. I had, the 4 girlfriends for a couple of years, and when that relationship ended, I just went on for more of the same, and at one point it was 7 girlfriends.
How does that work?
Well, it depends. It depends on who the girls are. I will say first and foremost that a number of girlfriends is easier than one wife, but it depends on who the women are. And did it always work? No. Were there sometimes conflicts? Yes. That's why I thinned the herd, so to speak, and went from the 7 down to a very special 3.
Playboy's success and influence peaked in the mid-1970s. In 1982, Hefner gave up the reins to the company to his daughter Christy, while he himself continued to live the life of an American playboy. Since the 1980s, the Playboy empire has been in steep decline, both in circulation and cultural relevance. Poor business decisions, the rise of sexually explicit video, the emergence of the internet, and other disruptive forces have put the company's future in doubt. Christy Hefner stepped down as chairman in January 2009. Yet despite the company's ups and downs, at age 82, the Hef remains largely content with the direction his life has taken.
It isn't just a life with a lot of girls and a good life, etc. It isn't that. It's to create something you really believe in and play some role in changing the world.